The morning mist hung low over the small industrial town of Riverside, where HFY Park lived a life that seemed perfectly ordinary. By day, he worked as an environmental researcher, his lean frame hunched over microscopes and complicated scientific equipment. But beneath his calm exterior burned an unquenchable passion for truth. HFY's journey began unexpectedly during a routine water sample collection near the local chemical manufacturing plant. Most people in Riverside had learned to ignore the strange colors that sometimes appeared in their tap water, a murky brown or an unsettling greenish tint. But HFY couldn't look away. Growing up in this town, he had watched families struggle with mysterious health issues. Childhood friends battled unexplained illnesses, and elderly neighbors seemed to develop strange conditions that doctors couldn't easily diagnose. Something wasn't right, and HFY was determined to understand why. His modest laboratory, tucked away in a small room behind his parents' modest home, became his sanctuary. Nights turned into weeks as he meticulously analyzed water samples, cross-referencing medical records and building a complex web of evidence. Each chemical trace, each medical report, was like a puzzle piece that slowly revealed a disturbing picture. The local chemical plant, owned by Riverside Industrial Solutions, had been the town's primary employer for decades. Generations of families depended on its jobs, and challenging the company seemed almost like an act of betrayal. But HFY knew that silence would cost more lives. His first breakthrough came on a rainy Tuesday evening. While comparing water samples from different town zones, he discovered a consistent pattern of toxic chemical contamination. Heavy metals, industrial solvents, and unknown compounds were present at levels far beyond legal limits. This wasn't just pollution. This was systematic environmental destruction. HFY remembered his grandfather's stories about the town's pristine rivers and clean groundwater. Those memories contrasted sharply with the toxic reality he was uncovering. Each document he processed, each graph he created, felt like a testament to a lost environmental heritage. But uncovering the truth wasn't going to be easy. The chemical plant was deeply integrated into the town's economic and social fabric. Local government officials, many of whom had personal connections to the company, would not welcome his findings. His colleagues advised caution. "Keep quiet," they would say. "Don't rock the boat." But HFY knew that quiet acceptance meant accepting slow, systematic destruction of their community's health and future. What made his research different was its human approach. He wasn't just collecting scientific data, he was documenting human stories. Each water sample represented a family's potential health risk. Each chemical trace was more than a number. It was a potential threat to someone's life. HFY's method was patient and strategic. He collected evidence methodically, building a case that would be impossible to dismiss. Medical records, water samples, industrial emission logs. He connected dots that others had deliberately kept separate. The town of Riverside seemed peaceful on the surface. Children played in parks, elderly people walked their dogs, workers came and went from the industrial plant. But beneath this calm exterior, a silent environmental crisis was brewing, and HFY was the only one willing to shine a light on it. As winter approached and the days grew shorter, HFY knew his real journey was just beginning. The evidence was mounting, and soon he would have to make a choice that would change everything, not just for himself, but for an entire community waiting to be awakened. Little did he know that his quiet rebellion was about to become a storm that would shake the foundations of corporate indifference and environmental negligence. The whispers of change were getting louder, and HFY was ready to amplify them. Would you like me to continue with the next part of the story? Part 2. The Silent Struggle. The first signs of resistance came swiftly and silently. HFY's research began attracting uncomfortable attention. Local officials who had always maintained a cozy relationship with Riverside Industrial Solutions started making quiet inquiries about his work. His university department, which had once supported his research, suddenly became distant. Funding requests were mysteriously delayed, research proposals met with bureaucratic hurdles. Colleagues who once shared coffee and scientific discussions now avoided eye contact in hallways. HFY's elderly mother noticed the change first. "Something's different," she told him during their Sunday dinner. Her intuition was sharp, her understanding of small-town dynamics deeper than any scientific report. She watched her son's determination grow, knowing the price of speaking truth in a community built on delicate economic balance. The chemical plant wasn't idle. Their legal team began a systematic approach to discredit Jiehua's research. Anonymous sources started spreading rumors about his methodological approach, questioning his professional credibility. Local newspapers, which depended on industrial advertising, published subtle hit pieces questioning his motivations. But Jiehua had prepared for this. Every document was meticulously verified, every sample carefully preserved. He started creating digital backups, sharing critical research with trusted environmental networks outside the town. His computer became a fortress of evidence, protected against potential interference. Local doctors became unexpectedly reluctant to discuss health patterns. Medical records became harder to access. When Jiehua requested historical health data, he was met with bureaucratic stonewalling and complex permission processes designed to exhaust his resolve. His personal life began to suffer. Dating became challenging. Who wanted to be associated with a researcher branded as a troublemaker? Family gatherings became tense, with relatives subtly suggesting he might be risking everyone's economic stability by challenging the town's primary employer. One cold evening, while reviewing his research, Jiehua received an unexpected visitor. An elderly gentleman whose family had worked at the chemical plant for generations quietly slipped him a folder of old company documents. "Be careful," the man whispered. "Some truths are dangerous." The documents revealed a decades-long pattern of environmental negligence. Waste disposal records showed systematic dumping. Internal memos discussed potential health risks that were deliberately ignored. Each page was a damning piece of evidence, yet also a potential threat to the community's economic lifeline. Jiehua understood the complexity of his mission. This wasn't just about environmental justice. It was about challenging an entire economic ecosystem. Families depended on the plant's jobs, local businesses thrived on worker spending, and the entire town's rhythm was synchronized with industrial operations. His nights became longer, filled with careful documentation and strategic planning. He began building a network of support: environmental lawyers, independent journalists, and concerned citizens who believed in transparency. Technology became his ally. Online platforms allowed him to share research beyond local restrictions. He created encrypted communication channels, ensuring his evidence couldn't be easily suppressed or manipulated. The struggle was emotional as much as it was scientific. Each setback tested his resolve, each obstacle a potential breaking point. But Jiehua remembered why he started: the unexplained illnesses, the contaminated water, the silent suffering of his community. Local power structures began feeling threatened. Subtle pressures mounted. Professional recommendations became complicated. Research grants disappeared and social connections grew strained. The town was sending a clear message: conform or be isolated. But Jiehua had discovered something more powerful than institutional pressure: the quiet, persistent hope of truth. His research wasn't just about chemicals and data. It was about human lives, about a community's right to know, to understand, to protect itself. As winter deepened and shadows grew longer, Jiehua prepared for the next phase of his journey. The silent struggle was about to become a loud, undeniable revelation. The whispers were transforming into a roar. Would you like me to continue with the next part of the story? Part 3. Building the Network. The coffee shop on Riverside's main street had always been more than just a place for caffeine. For generations, it was where community stories were shared, where local gossip mixed with genuine concerns. It was here that Jiehua's real movement would begin. Yoonji Kim wasn't a scientist. She was a local community organizer with fire in her eyes and a deep connection to the town's working-class families. When Jiehua first approached her with his research, she didn't immediately understand the complex scientific data, but she understood something more important: human suffering. Her own father had worked at the chemical plant for 30 years, dying from an aggressive form of cancer. that doctors struggled to explain. Many families in Riverside shared similar stories, unexplained illnesses, mysterious health conditions that seemed to cluster around the industrial zone. Their first meeting was cautious. Jaehua spread his documented evidence across an old wooden table, his hands slightly trembling. Yoonji listened, not just to the words, but to the emotion behind them. She realized this wasn't just about environmental data. This was about people's lives. They began mapping the town's health landscape carefully. Old medical records, family stories, generational health patterns, each piece of information became a crucial puzzle piece. They discovered something alarming. Certain neighborhoods near the chemical plant showed significantly higher rates of rare cancers and chronic conditions. Social media became their unexpected ally. Hyunji understood digital communication better than Jaehua. She created secure online groups where affected families could share their experiences anonymously. What started as a small digital space quickly grew into a powerful community network. Local workers, initially hesitant, began sharing their experiences. A maintenance worker provided internal plant documents. A retired nurse shared confidential medical observations. Each contribution added another layer to their growing evidence. Jaehua developed a systematic approach. He wasn't just collecting complaints, he was building a scientifically verifiable case. Every story was cross-referenced, every medical record carefully analyzed. Their network became more than an activist group. It transformed into a sophisticated research collective. The local library became their unofficial headquarters. Late into the night, they would spread documents across tables, connecting dots that authorities wanted to keep separate. Librarians, initially curious, became silent, supporters of their mission. Technology played a crucial role. Encrypted communication channels, secure cloud storage, and carefully managed digital platforms allowed them to protect their growing body of evidence. They understood that powerful entities would try to suppress their findings. Community meetings began happening in unexpected places: church basements, community centers, even private homes. People who had previously felt isolated discovered they weren't alone. Their individual stories of suffering were now part of a larger, more powerful narrative. Jaehua and Yoonji understood they were fighting more than a corporate entity. Their wounds were challenging an entire system of economic and environmental violence that had normalized human suffering for generations. Young professionals who had left Riverside started returning, drawn by the growing movement. They brought fresh perspectives, digital skills, and a renewed sense of community purpose. What had begun as a local investigation was transforming into a potential national story. Legal experts began taking notice. An environmental law firm from the capital city reached out, offering preliminary support. They saw something extraordinary happening in this small town. A grassroots movement built on meticulous research and human determination. Local journalists, initially skeptical, started asking questions. The carefully documented evidence was becoming too significant to ignore. What seemed like a local issue was revealing itself as a potential systemic problem affecting multiple communities. Fundraising became creative. Online campaigns, community events, and strategic outreach allowed them to continue their research without compromising their independence. Every donated dollar was a statement of community solidarity. As summer approached, their network had grown, from 2 passionate individuals to a formidable community movement. The whispers were becoming a collective voice, ready to challenge decades of environmental neglect. Jaehua and Yoonji knew their real battle was just beginning, but they were no longer alone. The network was ready. Would you like me to continue with the next part of the story? Part 4. The Explosive Revelation. The summer heat was suffocating, much like the tension building in Riverside. Jaehua and Yoonji had spent months preparing for this moment, a carefully orchestrated revelation that would expose the truth hidden for generations. Their plan was surgical in its precision. Multiple communication channels would be activated simultaneously, ensuring the information couldn't be suppressed or controlled. Local community centers, digital platforms, and media outlets were all prepared to broadcast their findings. The day began quietly. Jaehua woke before sunrise, reviewing thousands of documents one last time. His mother prepared a simple breakfast, her hands trembling slightly. She understood the magnitude of what was about to happen. Her son was about to challenge the most powerful institution in their town. Yoonji had spent weeks building a network of local and national journalists. Each had been given carefully curated pieces of evidence, ensuring no single source could be easily discredited. Their strategy was to create an information tsunami that would be impossible to contain. At precisely 9 a.m., the first wave of information went live. Community members who had been silently suffering for years began sharing their stories simultaneously across multiple platforms. Social media exploded with personal testimonies, medical records, and scientific evidence. Local television stations were initially hesitant, but the sheer volume of information made silence impossible. What had been a local investigation was now a national story unfolding in real time. Riverside Industrial Solutions found itself facing an unprecedented public challenge. The evidence was devastating. Decades of environmental contamination, deliberate suppression of health data, and systematic neglect of community well-being were laid bare. Jaehua's meticulous research showed not just isolated incidents, but a comprehensive pattern of corporate misconduct. Government officials who had long protected the industrial plant found themselves cornered. The carefully constructed narrative of economic progress suddenly crumbled under the weight of human suffering. Each piece of evidence was like a hammer blow to their credibility. Medical professionals who had previously remained silent began coming forward. Retired doctors, nurses, and researchers provided additional testimony, confirming the long-term health impacts of environmental contamination. The scientific community could no longer ignore the mounting evidence. Yoonji's community network proved crucial. Families who had lost loved ones, workers who had suffered in silence, and local residents united in their demand for accountability. What had started as a local investigation had transformed into a powerful social movement. The chemical plant's response was predictable but ineffective. Legal threats, attempts to discredit the researchers, and PR campaigns fell flat against the overwhelming evidence. Each attempt to suppress the truth only drew more attention to their misconduct. National media descended on Riverside. Investigative journalists found a story more compelling than they could have imagined. A small town taking on a powerful industrial giant, armed with nothing more than truth and determination. Digital platforms became a battleground of information. Live streams, detailed documentaries, and real-time updates kept the public engaged. People from across the country began supporting the Riverside community, sharing their own stories of environmental injustice. Jaehua and Yoonji found themselves at the center of a movement larger than themselves. They weren't just researchers or activists anymore. They had become symbols of hope for communities fighting against corporate negligence. Government investigation teams arrived, initially skeptical but quickly overwhelmed by the comprehensive evidence. What had seemed like an impossible challenge was now a full-scale national inquiry. The local community center became the heart of the movement. People who had been isolated by fear and economic pressure now found strength in collective action. Generations of suffering were finally being acknowledged, validated, and challenged. As evening approached, the reality of their achievement began to sink in. Jaehua and Yoonji understood that this was more than a victory against a single corporation. They had exposed a systemic failure that had gone unchallenged for decades. The explosive revelation had changed everything. The truth could no longer be contained. Would you like me to continue with the final part of the story? Part 5. Victory and Transformation. The courtroom felt different that morning. Sunlight streamed through large windows, illuminating a space that would become a turning point for environmental justice. Jaehua sat quietly, his hands folded, watching. As years of research transformed into legal action, Riverside Industrial Solutions had finally been brought to account. The national investigation had confirmed what Jaehua and Yoonji had known all along: systematic environmental destruction that had impacted generations of families. The evidence was irrefutable, the human cost impossible to ignore. the legal proceedings became more than a corporate trial. It was a public healing process for an entire community. Families who had lost loved ones, workers who had suffered in silence, now had a chance to share their stories. Each testimony was a powerful reminder of human resilience. Compensation wasn't just about money. The settlement included comprehensive health care for affected families, environmental restoration programs, and strict new industrial regulations. It was a blueprint for how communities could fight back against corporate negligence. Hyunji had transformed from a local organizer to a national environmental advocate. Her ability to connect scientific data with human stories made her a powerful voice for change. Universities began inviting her to speak, recognizing the importance of community-driven research. Jae-hwa's research laboratory, once a small room in his parents' home, was now a recognized center for environmental investigation. Young researchers from across the country sought his guidance, inspired by his unwavering commitment to truth. The town of Riverside began a slow but meaningful transformation. New environmental protection laws were implemented, creating a model for other industrial communities. Local schools started incorporating environmental awareness into their curriculum, ensuring future generations understood the importance of ecological responsibility. Economic revitalization became a community-driven process. The settlement funds were partially used to develop sustainable industries, creating jobs that didn't compromise environmental health. Local entrepreneurs began exploring green technology and sustainable development. Medical research centers established long-term health monitoring programs for the affected communities. What had been hidden for decades was now being systematically studied and addressed. Each medical breakthrough felt like a small victory against years of corporate silence. The national media continued following the story, highlighting how a small group of determined individuals could challenge powerful institutions. Jae-hwa and Yoonji became symbols of hope, proving that persistent evidence-based activism could create real change. Government policy began shifting. The Riverside case became a landmark example of environmental accountability. New regulations were drafted, giving local communities more power to challenge industrial misconduct. What had started as a local struggle was now creating national impact. Young people in the community found a new sense of purpose. Environmental science became an attractive career path. Schools saw increased interest in research, community organizing, and sustainable development. The next generation was being inspired by the victory. Families who had suffered for generations found healing. Support groups formed, providing mental health resources and community connection. The collective trauma was being transformed into collective strength. Jae-hwa's parents watched their son with quiet pride. The shy researcher who had once worked in a small room had become a national voice for environmental justice. Their sacrifices and support had been crucial to his journey. Yoonji continued building community networks, understanding that their work was far from over. Each new environmental challenge was an opportunity for collective action, for proving that community power could overcome institutional resistance. The chemical plant was transformed. Under new management and strict regulations, it became a model of responsible industrial practices. The very institution that had once been a symbol of environmental destruction was now a potential example of positive change. As months passed, the Riverside story became more than a local narrative. It was a testament to the power of persistent research, community solidarity, and unwavering commitment to truth. Jae-hwa and Yoonji had done more than expose a corporate crime. They had shown that real change begins with ordinary people willing to stand up, speak out, and fight for what's right. The victory was complete. The transformation had just begun. Would you like me to make any modifications or discuss the story further?